Hey, what's up, y'all? For for a while now, actually since I've been making videos, I've been kicking around the idea of telling my story about how I got off of meth and how I got started. And recently, I'd been looking for a friend that I hadn't seen, and well, I hadn't seen him since about 1994. Uh, and this was a guy I had always kept in touch with, and I lost touch with him then when he had moved to Los Angeles. But I would always, I knew that he'd gone to LA, and I'd look for somebody with his phone number, and or I'd call his dad and try to get up with his dad. And, I was always able to get in touch with him, and he moved several times. And but anyway, hadn't been able to get in touch with him, and every now and then I'd do a search, and was never able to find him that way. Well, the other night I did a search, and I found it, and it listed his birth date and the date of his death, and I was just totally blown away. I mean, this was a guy I was really close to. We were real good friends for a long time. And to find out he was dead was just, it was devastating. That's really heartbreaking. He was a really good friend. I mean, we weren't good for each other. We were those kind of friends where you two clicked and everything was right there. But you guys being together was a bad idea. That's how me and James were. Sucks. So, I've decided to take this time to go ahead and tell my story about how I started and how I stopped doing meth. And to talk about James, as well as some of the other people I used with. And, there are a bunch of them that aren't with us anymore. I mean, they died a long time ago. I know quite a few that didn't even use for 5 years, and they died. I used for 15 years. 15 years I spent chasing a drug. But anyway, when I first met James, he didn't do drugs. I didn't do drugs. I mean, I had smoked pot once or twice, when my uncles or cousins, got me high or let me get a drink of beer or, that kind of shit. Even my grandpa gave me a shot of moonshine when I was just a little boy. Well, I was about 8 years old. Liquid fire. But, I mean, and he had probably similar stories to that. But, I liked James right away. He was cool when we were kids. Me and him teamed up. And, our junior high years were typical. We got into some trouble here and there, and his dad didn't like me, and my mom didn't like him, and I don't think my dad cared either way. But, my mom saw that we were bad for each other right off. Moms have a way of doing that shit. But, yeah, and actually now that I think about it, I think we smoked pot once when we were in junior high together. But anyway, we spent most of our time just scouting around the areas that we lived. They were still pretty rural, so we scouted and, did shit like that. Took our BB guns out and shot shit and, that kind of shit. And after, I believe it was his 8th grade year, or I think it was the summer we were supposed to go into high school, he moved. And it was like, I don't know, it was a weird ass move because he moved like out of the blue. And we didn't see or hear from him. And then one day I think I found his name in the phone book, or I found his father's name in the phone book, and I called and it was him. And we hooked up again. This time he was living down in Mission Beach. And right at that point he had already hooked up with a pretty rough crowd down there. And he had already done acid. And one night we were supposed to get some acid. And this was my freshman year in high school. It was like summer break or something. And I was staying down there at their place in Mission Beach, and me and him snuck out and hooked up with this dude and got some acid. And this guy, he takes a detour sign and he runs it out into the middle of the street. And I'm already halfway up the hill. I started walking away from this dude because I knew he was about to do something stupid. I knew it. Well, I think James knew it too, because he had caught up to me real quick. But this guy puts this detour sign, causes like a 3-car pileup right there. And the cops show up, and they chased us. Me and James broke off, and we got away from that dude. And we went to the store, and we actually had some money on us, so we were in the store and we bought stuff, and we were walking back to his house. And whoever had given our descriptions gave very good descriptions, because the cops rolled up on us, and we told them who did it and everything, and what the deal was, and that we didn't have any part of it. That we didn't do stupid shit like that. I mean, he could have killed somebody, and we didn't do. We did shit where we were stupid, but the only one who was going to get hurt was us. For most of the time. There were times that, I suppose other people could have gotten hurt, but it wouldn't have been like that, though. But after that, his father was like, "Nah, you guys ain't hanging out no more." And I wasn't allowed to call, wasn't allowed to talk to him or whatever. And like a year or two passed, and I lost his number. Well, anyway, I was going through the phone book again, and I find his dad's name and number, but he's now living in Santee. And at this point, I'm 16, and I've got a car. And so I go over there, and pretty much, we would just take off and do whatever we wanted for a little bit there. And then they moved again. His dad was like a trip about the telephone. He wouldn't give away their numbers, not even to their kids, which was a trip. We had to find it. But anyway, I ended up finding them again. But at this point, when I found him again, I had started using meth at that point. And that was because one of the girls I went to high school with, man, I really liked her. Really liked her a lot. And I would get weed from her every now and then. And at this point I was also about 16, 15, 16, somewhere in there. And it was right before I started hanging out again with James again. And I'd gone by there to buy some weed from her. And she didn't have any weed, but she had some meth. And she told me she'd give me some. Just to try it, just to see what it was like and everything. I said, alright. So she gave me a little line. Man, I felt awesome. I felt better than I had ever felt or will ever feel again in my life. And I was hooked instantly. And I had bought it a few times after that from her. And after a while, it was about 3 months after the first time I had done it, I ended up getting, my parents, they confronted me about it. They figured something was up. They had noticed that I was doing shit a little bit off. And it's right before I hooked up again with James, because I had quit. I remember this now. I quit, and you know, I had gotten off everything. I had to drop out of school, but I had all this free time, and I started hanging out with James. And James, me and him just started doing shit. We'd do meth every now and then, but most of the time, I mean, we didn't even want meth. We wanted acid. Acid is what we like to do. And we spent lots of cool ass times just frying our brains. That was awesome. Those times were really great. Our times didn't go bad until we started using meth again. When that happened, that's when everything started to go downhill. James had gotten to a point where he wasn't in good with his dad. His dad knew he was doing drugs and shit. And that was a trip too, because his dad had done drugs. You know, I think, you know, if your parents lived in the 60s or 70s, there's a pretty damn good chance they did drugs at one point or another time. But he wasn't open-minded about it as much as when his kids started doing it. My parents, they knew I did it. They didn't like that I did it. And most of the time, they pretty much left me alone about it, which was good. Because when they pressured me about it, it just pissed me off even more. But I was also dating a girl who I later had a kid with, and we were all experimenting with drugs. You know, James was like one of the team there. You know, I hung out with him all the time. I always knew that he had my back and that I could relax in a way that you could never relax. I knew I didn't have anything to worry about as long as he was right there with me, because we were cool. I looked out for him, he looked out for me. We were home, you know, even when we were homeless, he stayed with me in my truck. You know, part of me wishes, and all that came down to one day, he was fed up with everything. His dad was, you know, butting in, and he was 18. His dad was telling him he was going to pretty much kick him out anyway, and James called me, and I came up there. He was living in Escondido at that time, and I went and picked him up, and he stayed in my truck for shit, like 6 months, and eventually, I mean, I ended up becoming homeless too, so we'd hang out, and we run into other people, and we meet other people, and we start hanging with them, and, you know, I did still have a truck, so I wasn't completely useless, so we were able to get money, we were able to hustle, we were able to keep shit on the move, and we were able to keep high. I remember at one point, me, him, and my girlfriend were all living in my truck, and we all had jobs. I was working 2 jobs, my girlfriend was working 2 jobs, James was working 2 jobs, but we were all still homeless. I mean, that's how sad our situation was. And we could, you know, when you're in that situation, because you have to spend a little bit of extra money, you know, it makes it hard. And plus, being on drugs, you know, makes it even harder. We just we could never get on top of our fucking game, which is crazy. We also had a place that fired us one day, and they wouldn't give us our damn money. You know, that shit's kind of messed up too. But we all worked together for a long time, and then one day me and Jennifer kind of had it up with him. We had set him up with girls. We you know, tried to get him to become a little bit more motivated than what he was. He started to get to a point where he was really depressing, you know, and you know, he decided that he wanted to go and stay with these other people. He was sick of us, and so we kind of parted ways there. Well, me and Jennifer ended up getting an apartment, and we started doing pretty good, and, you know, we used on the weekends and tried to keep it like that so that we were able to have some kind of a family life with, you know, show our daughter something. And you know, things were pretty good then, and he ended up starting to come back around, and we all started hanging out again. And but it was different this time, you know. By this time, we had given up on doing acid and shit like that, and just smoking pot. But by this time, we were really heavy into meth, real heavy into meth. And he was even shooting it up. By this time, he'd also started using heroin and shit. And I had tried heroin. I didn't like heroin. I mean, to me, I just didn't see the fun in being all wasted like that. I mean, when I did it, I'd shoot it up, and I was puking everywhere. And then I'd kind of pass out, and then I'd, you know, puke some more, and then I'd be falling out, you know, just... To me, there was no fun in that. I like being on acid where it's just like, whoa, it's cool. But from there, things started to get even harder for him. He really lost a lot of weight, and I started making sure that he was at least eating. You know, I cared about him a lot. He was like he was another guy who was like a brother. And he also hung out with the other guy from our pack. But really the only three that were really hung together for any amount of time was me, James, and Steve. Steve's still alive, which is good. Gonna be flying out to California to see him. We're gonna be going through our old stomping ground. He'll be shocked as hell when I tell him. I still haven't even told him that I found out what happened to James. It'll be hard. I mean, of course, then again, Steve may not care. There were times that they had some run-ins, and they weren't friends like me and James were friends. Actually, it was his brother. James pulled a knife on his brother, but hell, I pulled a gun on his brother. So. Knife gun was, you know, his brother was a dick. But Steve is cool. Yeah. God, man. All those years wasted. Steve was a good friend too. He was there later. But anyway, back to where I was when by this time James is also using heroin and shit, and it wasn't the same. He was really hurt on the inside, I think. Really hurt. He did some time for a while there. He was in jail for an assault, and when he got out of jail, I tried to do all kinds of shit for the guy, and his life did get better at that point. He did get better. He went through a couple of halfway houses, and he got a little sobered up, and you know, he got better. But then he started hanging out with this other dude. That's the dude he moved to LA with. And that dude, he was bad news all day long. But, and that was about 90, 91, 92. And then in 93, James, he showed up at my house one day. He had a bunch of syringes and a bunch of dope and a shitload of money, and he's all, hey man, he comes in, he's all, there's a lot of things I want to confess to you, and a lot of things I want to say, and he's all, I love you, and he's all, but I also love your girlfriend. And, you know, apparently that was part of the reason he hung out so much too, was he was in love with my girlfriend, which all my friends were. But he tells me that, and I told him, hey, I didn't care. Everybody else was too. And at that point, me and her were pretty much over. I mean, we were in our relationship death throes there. And, by that time I was really heavy on meth. Really bad on meth. But he tells me all these things, and I give him a hug and tell him, hey, it's just like when we were kids, I made a pact with him that we would, even if we got into a fight over anything, that we'd always still be friends afterwards, and that we'd always, let each other know. And, I reminded him of that. And I told him that, I always had a feeling that he liked my girlfriend. I mean, I'd ask him, hey, do you think she's pretty? Do you think she's this? He'd be like, no, she's not my type. He'd always say something, and I would always be like, yeah, bullshit. I don't know you, what's up with you, but that's the way that went. We did some dope together, and I gave him a hug, and he gave me a hug, and he told me he was headed to L.A., and that eventually he was going to get off drugs, and he was going to be going to school, and that was it. And that was about 93. It may have been, actually, it could have been closer to 94. Actually, it may have been 94, and then he took off to L.A., and that was the last time I saw him. But, my drug problem continued. And I think I'll save that for part 2 of this, to be a series of how I started and stopped drugs, but also the people that affected my life in between, as well as the situations that I had run into during all this madness of my life. But anyway, y'all take care. Later.